Hi, my name is Brian Loschiavo. I am the co-founder, partner, and executive producer at Riverside Entertainment. You might know me as the producer, director, and editor of the documentary music film Bluebird. I've also done some work with the show Nashville, was at ABC before that. And currently I am the head of development, all things development at Riverside Entertainment, which is a production company based in Nashville and Los Angeles that does everything from film and TV to commercial and promo production.
Brian Loschiavo, welcome to the Make It podcast.
Chris Barkley, great to be here.
Man, it's really awesome to have you. And you mentioned Bluebird in your introduction. I watched the documentary. I didn't want it to end.
Oh, thanks, man.
I didn't want it to end. I just, and I know I'm biased because I grew up in Nashville. They call that type of person a unicorn now, because I'm actually from here and grew up here and watched this whole thing blossom into what it is today. But I'm watching it, and as a musician, as a person who has just been in that Green Hills area where the Bluebird is my entire life, fantasizing myself about taking that stage. I just didn't want it to end. I will admit too, I'm a big softie, and there was a song or two in the middle, and my wife turns to me and she says, "Are you crying?"
Yeah. I'm going to guess.
No, I'm not crying. I'm tired.
I'm going to guess Tennille Towns got you, because I was weeping in the room when we recorded that. So
that was the one, man. You nailed it.
I don't blame you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. So I really would tell everyone listening to this, go watch the documentary Bluebird. You can watch it with ads if you prefer, I think, on YouTube. And where else can you see it right now?
Yeah, I mean, the primary places to check it out are anywhere that you can buy or rent. So if it's Apple or Amazon, Comcast, pretty much anywhere that has on-demand features. We're working on a streaming deal. I believe there's a couple AVOD, like you said, based places that carry it now. I'm not up to speed on all of the latest, but the easiest is probably to just hop on iTunes or Apple TV, whatever.
Yeah, this stuff happens like sort of like low key. Like, like one of our movies just showed up on YouTube for free, but it was through our... Normally I would call like YouTube and say, "Hey, someone's jacking us."
Yeah.
But this was like through our distributor. And I was like, "Oh."
Yeah. And you saying on YouTube makes you want to go check out and make sure that that's legit. Because we have had it a couple times where people have pirated it and put it up there, and we've had to chase them. The Taylor Swift element, man, they're all over it. Rabid fan base. We had an issue with actually her performance getting leaked. Somebody from like Argentina, I think, hacked into our Vimeo account and ripped the movie. Wow. And just released her performance from the film.
Wow.
A rough cut too, which was a real bummer because it wasn't even like the finished product. But yeah, it was a thing.
It's crazy. There's all these like pirates for good and pirates for bad. It's really interesting. We check all of our movies about once a month and to see if they're being pirated. And this one, most of the time it's bad. But one time we went on there and we found that someone had pirated our movie, but they had done a review of the movie. Now, this was in a foreign language.
Right.
It's like somewhere in Europe. I don't know exactly which European language, forgive me.
That's hilarious.
But
they dubbed it.
You could tell by his tone in the comments, that like you could hit the translate button like in Google, like, "Oh, this was a positive review." So we just left it up there.
Yeah.
We're like, okay, use the film, use as many scenes as you want. Like, you're gushing about our movie. Right. Great. Like that's wonderful. Let me rewind before I get too far ahead of myself.
For sure.
And help this audience get a slightly deeper sense of who you are. I'm just going to read a short bio. You know, it's the internet. You can tell me if anything needs to be amended to or is incorrect.
Sure.
But I'll get it started. Brian Loschiavo is a filmmaker, songwriter, and co-founder of the Nashville and Los Angeles-based production company Riverside Entertainment, specializing in music documentary. His past directing and producing credits include broadcast music specials for the television series Nashville and documentary films Bluebird and Midland, The Sonic Ranch. He lives in beautiful Nashville, Tennessee, and is head of development for Riverside Entertainment. And Riverside is an award-winning company. We're going to talk a lot about Riverside as we go, but I do want to start in a different place, if you don't mind.
Sure, please.
How does a obsessed skateboarder turn into a filmmaker?
Oh, God.
Because my understanding is that you were all in on skateboarding.
Well, I'll say this: I did skateboard for a little while, and it's not as cool anymore, or maybe it never was. But I was actually more into like the aggressive inline skating, which I think the skateboarding community kind of laughs at. But it's still marginally cooler than like the razor. People that are riding around on razors in a skate park. But I was like fully down the rabbit hole of skating, both skateboarding and that. I went to like skate camp at a place called Woodward in Pennsylvania.
Woodward's the one.
Yeah, man. So that was really, it was funny.
You're being humble, because I think to get into Woodward, you have to be the real deal.
Yeah, I did. I did. I was way too serious about it as a kid. I had high hopes for getting sponsored and all that stuff, but definitely wasn't good enough for that. But what I did catch the bug was making skate videos. So yeah, it was kind of this perfect confluence of events that happened right around probably my freshman or sophomore year of high school. Was like crazy into skating, and found out that there was this like video production class in my high school, which I very much credit my high school looking at now, understanding, how arts programs and schools all over the country, especially public schools. I went to a public school, are in jeopardy. It's like budget cuts are happening and they're prioritizing academics, and all of that's great, but arts obviously are important and especially important for people like me. And we just had a completely cutting edge. It was kind of on that cusp of like the transition into digital for filmmaking. My high school had what at the time was called a Media 100 system, which was kind of the precursor to Final Cut. Was like Apple's first nonlinear editing system. We were, using like jazz discs for extra hard drive space. All kinds of stuff that, a lot of the newer generation probably don't even know what that means.
And you grew up in Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah, I grew up outside of Philly, a town called Westchester, Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Where Ben Margera is from. If you're a skateboarding fan, there's a lot of good skateboarders that come out of there. But the whole Jackass scene was in my hometown. But yeah, that's where I caught the bug, and very early on kind of knew that that's the path I wanted to take. I think before my junior year, I knew I wanted to try to go to film school, and just everything behind the lens, wanted to be a director. I really fell in love with the editing process, early on and saw that all the way through, film school. And then, it's kind of been a singular focus all along of this is a thing that I feel like I'm good at and am passionate about and want to try to make a career out of.
But it was really born out of skateboarding. My guess is that a lot of times when you're skateboarding, you skateboard with a crew.
Yeah.
And is it true that your crew basically trusted you with the filming and editing of everybody's skating?
Yeah, absolutely. That was the thing. It was me and another guy named Phil. And I remember kind of one of my fondest memories of like the skate video era was we wanted to make like our definitive, like our crews, like skate, everybody would have their part and, and you got to pick the soundtrack, that was all about skate videos was like, what was the song that you had on and like your part. And, we stayed up, like he stayed over my place one night and we like stayed up all night with like 2 VCRs, RCA cables going everywhere, a CD player going into the VCR. Like, so we were doing it like almost like the old school film way of
you were cutting VCR tape.
Yeah. We were basically doing reel to reel on VCRs. And so the quality was terrible because every time we would make a dupe, it was like degrading the quality. Cause like if anybody knows VCR, like that technology is, ancient at this point, but it was fun because that was really like the best way to learn the logic behind what you're doing now on, so quick and easy in like, Premiere or whatever you're using, Avid.
Yeah.
The fundamentals behind that are that kind of reel to reel. Like, what is B-roll? B-roll is like when you cut from another thing onto whatever's playing now, and you like splice that in, and then how does the music bed work? It's a separate layer of audio that you need to put on top. So that was very much a kind of a DIY film school before film school.
And it's funny because in a way, it's like your friends chose your career for you.
For sure, yeah.
It shows your life path for you. Like it's not exactly the same, but I remember I had a bunch of friends that went to Vandy, mm-hmm. including my business partner, Nick. That's where I met him, at Vanderbilt University. But I didn't go to Vandy, right? So I had all these people around me that, quite frankly, I was a little bit intellectually intimidated by,
okay.
right?
Yeah.
Because they were from all over the country and they were the smartest kids in their school.
Right.
And that's what they were doing there. And I'm just trying to catch up. But here I am. I'm part of this thing they were calling the junto that they had sort of stole from Benjamin Franklin. And I think he called it a junta, or maybe the correct conjugation was junta, but he was calling it junto because he didn't know. So anyway, we were in this thing, right? And I was in it. I'm like, what am I doing here? What am I in this group for? Maybe I'm not worthy. And we had these get-togethers where everybody would come back to town after they graduated. And here's what happened. We got in this hotel room and we decided, hey, how can we make money? And they're like, well, everyone agreed we have to just make money, the Wall Street way. Like, let's make money, let's invest in stuff. Well, it turns out when everybody is equally sort of yoked intellectually, they don't trust each other. So they said, who in this room can we trust to not like leave with our money if we put it into a pot? And they're like, Chris. He's too dumb to steal the money. So here I am. I'm like,
more to it than Chris.
I said, guys, I've got no fucking idea how to invest. I don't know what I'm doing. So this is how, and this is so different because I grew up very modestly.
Right. And
most of my friends there did not. This is how loose they were, because it's something I could never imagine saying growing up. They said, well, that's fine. You'll just learn it. They were cool just losing all the money as long as like somebody was trying to do something with it on the side. Right. Like it was like this extra rev stream. And that's how I learned how to invest.
That's cool. Like
they let me like lose money and they let me get us money and figure out the movement of the market and things like that. And I got to do it on somebody else's dime. And in a way, they kind of chose a path for me in one of my lines of business. It's so funny how, our friend groups are more influential than our parents. Although I should ask you, what did your parents think about you going from something like skateboarding to filmmaking?
Well, I think they were thrilled that skating wasn't my future. But
okay. I was wondering, it was like, I'm not going to be a skateboarder, Mom.
Yeah,
Great.
Yeah.
What are you going to be?
But with
a filmmaker.
Yeah, exactly. But with film school, I mean, they rightly so. There were several schools that I was looking at, and they really wanted me to get a well-rounded education. Not necessarily pushing a fallback, not necessarily, pushing a plan B, because they really wanted me, you kind of have to go all in if you really want to do something. You can't have a foot out. But they did, I think it was also just from like a general education standpoint, didn't want me to be too narrow in my focus. So, I didn't go to like a liberal arts school. I went to a, proper university.
You went to Temple, right?
Temple in Philly. Yeah.
Yep.
And so that, but I really, one of the things that you just said that really resonates with me is the freedom to fail, I think, is really key in anything in life, especially if it's something new that you're trying to learn. My parents very much empowered me in that sense, that they didn't put this pressure on me, that like every project that I worked on, every opportunity that I pursued, it was, if you don't succeed right away, that it's okay to fail, and that's a natural part of the process. My dad's a very entrepreneurial guy. He actually ran the entrepreneurship center at Drexel University for a few years, several years, and so that spirit's always been in the family and kind of encouraged. Which obviously entrepreneurship, there's a lot of inherent kind of trial and error and failure that goes along with that. But you saying that, like, yes, it was your friend group, but also that freedom that you had to make mistakes and learn via those mistakes. Similarly, for me, with just going back to those skate videos, it's like, there was, it was all messy. I mean, it was a bunch of like, trial and error and figuring it out as you go. And I think while education is important, doing the thing and getting your hands dirty and kind of letting it be messy and destructive gets you to the right place.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It's a really good pull by you, because at the end of the day, if you don't make the videos, they don't have videos. So who cares if it's messy?
Right.
Like we want the videos. So like, let's just live with the learning process, the curve. You do have a co-founder in Riverside Entertainment. Is it pronounced Molyneux?
Yep. Jeff Molyneux.
Yeah. How did you meet Jeff Molyneux?
Sure. Yeah. And it's three partners. Jeff and I guess, are technically the co-founders, but Pastor Alvarado, who's our third partner, was kind of always a part of the plan. So, I hate to.
How does he feel about being left out of the?
Good question. You should have him on next. No, but
I kid.
The kind of story behind the origins of Riverside are that the three of us all worked together at ABC and Disney ABC Television Group. It was what it was called at the time, in LA. Met there, doing again, a really cool department within ABC at the time. It was called the ABC Digital or Disney ABC Television Group Digital Studio. And it was kind of in the early days of when all of the networks were trying to figure out streaming and their online presence. It was before any of the OTT apps. So this was like right as ABC was starting to simultaneously release their shows for streaming through their website, through abc.com. And they were trying to figure out that mechanism in addition to like traditional broadcasts and cable. And so there was this kind of like Wild West mentality of like, we're trying to figure out this whole digital thing. We want to drive people to the website. We need content to support our linear shows. So here, guys, like here, young team of creators, like here's a bunch of, resources, go make it. So Jeff was an in-house DP. I was an in-house kind of director, editor, producer. Pastor is in a similar role as mine. And they, to their credit, just kind of let us play around and try things out and get messy. And some of it worked, some of it didn't. But working in, a pretty big playground with some pretty heavy, hitters, being in a big network and a big corporation like Disney, but also having kind of this autonomy to be really creative and experimental. And one of the things that came out of that was I pitched an idea for a show, a music documentary series that was a digital series in support of the show Nashville. As a musician, as soon as I saw that pilot, I immediately knew I wanted to work on that show. I had family in Kentucky, but I hadn't spent much time in Nashville, but it just seemed like a cool spot. And, so they went for it. We did basically like a songwriter story. It was like the story of how the song was written and then ended up on the show. So we would interview the songwriters. They would do an acoustic version, kind of like what their work tape was of the song. And then we would kind of tell the story of how it was selected by the music supervisor and then went into production for the show and how it ended up in whatever scene it was in the episode. And that got me going out to Nashville. And Jeff was a little bit a part of that. He had done a bunch of stuff with the CMA Awards, which is another ABC property. So he was coming back and forth to Nashville for, CMA Awards and CMA Fest. And he knew the city really well. So through that series, that's what ended up, when you mentioned the broadcast specials, that was kind of an offshoot of that digital series that kind of grew into something bigger. But really introduced me to the songwriting community here, the music industry here, and just absolutely fell in love with the city. And that eventually ended up being how Jeff left first, just for personal reasons. He came out here just to be a freelance cinematographer. And about a year into it, saw the opportunity, saw the amazing community that was here, the crew, the creators, everybody that was here, and how it was kind of becoming this it city that everyone knows now, but at that time it was just starting to bubble up, and convinced me about a year later to to leave ABC and come out here and start Riverside with him. And then we convinced Pastor to jump ship about a year later and stay in LA and run the operation out of there. So now Jeff and I are here, Pastor's there, and we're kind of split between the two cities.
That explains the LA branch of Riverside Entertainment. Yeah. I am curious how you got the gig. How did you, and for for this audience, those listening, how did you actually get on at ABC and Disney? Is there a story you can share about that? Then, and how was Jeff so confident that the three of you guys would work well together after only having worked on sort of one thing together?
Absolutely. It's a good story because it's one that I always, if I'm talking to like, film school kids or interns or anything like that, it's one of the great lessons that I had. And I almost missed it. I credit my wife with most of my good decisions in life, but we were, out of Philly, out of film school. I started a little post-production operation in Philly doing like legal videos. And it was pretty lucrative for like a 22-year-old. And but I still had dreams. I had scripts that I had under my arm at that time, and like was determined to move out to LA and be a big writer director. So got married and we just packed our bags without jobs or anything and just moved across country and moved to LA. My wife quickly got a very stable and well-paying gig while I was fluttering around trying to figure out the industry and all of that. So for the first, 5 years or so in LA, I made the decision, it was kind of like go the assistant route and try to like kind of ingratiate myself into like the agency management world, or just find a day job to pay the bills that I can then, have time to write and try to pursue the career thing. Right. Decided to go that route. So I got a day job, filming depositions, legal depositions. So I could kind of just press record, be in the room, and then I would kind of secretly be writing my screenplay on the side. Sorry to any of the attorneys that might be watching this. I was paying attention kind of. And and then at the same time, this is kind of where the lesson comes in. I was kind of roped into, through a friend, this sketch comedy group, which I don't consider myself, an expert in comedy, but it was just something fun to do. It was a little community of people. And got involved with that. It was kind of in the early days of YouTube. So we were trying to do like the kind of Funny or Die thing, making those types of movies or like comedic sketch videos. And one of the guys in that group, one of the actors in that group, had a gig at ABC, and they had an opening for this like ABC Family morning show thing. And they needed a producer for it, and it was just a freelance gig. And he said, would you be interested? And at that time, I was like this close on a pilot that I had written, and I was like this close on a feature, and I was working with this producer who had optioned all this stuff. And I was, I was so close to doing the real thing that I wanted to do, that this digital like morning show ABC Family thing felt like beneath me. And my wife quickly grounded me and said, no, you're going to take this gig. You're going to take this paycheck. This could lead to something better. And I did take it. And that then led to another gig with them. That then led to a full-time job with them. That then, then it all unfolded from there. So I think the lesson out of that is to be open. It's not always going to be the direct line that you draw for yourself. It's going to zig, it's going to zag. It may not even look the way you wanted it to. I thought for sure I wanted to be a screenwriter and then go the TV route and be like a staff writer and then a showrunner. And the more I learned about the business, the more I realized that wasn't a good lifestyle for me. It's not what I enjoy doing. I still love to provide the opportunity to scratch that itch when I can. But in reality, it's more of both the business and production side of it as well. So more like producing and directing, that kind of thing. So yeah, just to, surround yourself with a community of people, like find your tribe when you're starting out in this business. I was able to do that. And that then, led to a lot. And all of the people that were part of that like sketch comedy crew now have gone on to do great things. One of them is, a network executive at ABC. One of them is one of them is a very successful actor now. One of the, like all of them went on to do great things. So like at the time it may feel small and you may want to have cool friends that are like, already doing the thing that you want to do. But once you find your tribe, it's like rising tide lifts all boats, and eventually you'll have your people, and you can each kind of help each other, pull each other up as you go.
That's a great story. I am curious if you could share any stories of what it was like to be a writer in LA during the strike.
Oh,
like
man.
Having that timing of moving out there. And look, and right now the WGA is up against the contract expiration right now. So maybe there's a strike coming, maybe not. Yeah. But you have firsthand experience having moved to LA during a strike.
Yeah, it was weird because I wasn't WGA, obviously, because I was a nobody. And so like part of me was kind of like, is this my opportunity? Like everybody needs scripts right now. Like I'll be that guy. No, it was weird. Yeah, it was a weird time. And like, I know several people. I kind of had a project that it happened to, but I know a few people that like had projects set up and then that happened and it kind of derailed their like big moment. So fortunately for me, I never had it happen like that. It was an interesting thing to experience. Like my first introduction to the business was this like huge, kind of tectonic shift that happened and this kind of major disruption. But yeah, it fortunately didn't affect me a ton. But I did have a couple like, similar kind of fate things get in the way a few times. We had a show, the producer that I was working with at the time, it was the pilot that we were like, we knew like, this is unequivocally, if this is going to sell, this is going to be the one. She knew what network she wanted to take it to. She had meetings set up. I was like just finishing the final touches on the pilot script. And just to, kill time, I went on deadline. It was just kind of like, the nervous tick you do to like procrastinate. And the show was about a female fixer. There were no shows on TV about fixers, right?
Right. Yeah.
Shonda Rhimes, new deal with, under her deal with ABC, the new fixer show about a female fixer named Olivia Pope. It's called Scandal. Mm-hmm. And then like Ray Donovan happened like right after that. So like suddenly now there's like 2 fixer shows. So that kind of left us dead in the water, but that stuff always happens. That's why you just got to you got to be prolific. You got to be diversified and just, be ready for anything to happen. Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah. There's a lot of writers that get paranoid in those situations.
Oh yeah.
Where they're sure that their pitch was taken and repurposed.
Yeah.
Like, that was my fixer show.
Right.
And you're like, no, it really wasn't your fixer show. There's a lot of people working on the same thing at the same time. And it's really about execution and your ability to implement an idea. You can't like copyright or patent an idea. Well, you can patent an idea, but you have to put it on paper. But you can't like copyright an idea in the world of writing.
Yeah, man. It's the same thing in music. You see it happening a lot with all these like, claims that people stole melodies and songs and stuff. Yeah. It's like everything's derivative, man. Like we all are products of like the pop culture and our devices, and what we're consuming, the content that we're consuming. And
although I will say that Olivia Rodrigo thing seemed like she was spot on to Paramore.
That one was, I mean, and she
seemed like she really got it.
I was like, okay, you're right. But even then, like, I believe that might have been unintentional. And they're like, yeah, this melody, this sounds great. Like not realizing that they heard it before, but yeah, there's,
maybe,
it's funny when I did those legal video, like depositions, I sat through, cause it was LA. I was in a lot of like entertainment, litigation cases and a lot of copyright infringement, like a couple really big, cases of people thinking that their movies were stolen, their scripts were stolen. And some of them felt like they had merit. So I don't want to, discredit it, but it certainly seems more the case that we're all just living in the same society and ideas spring out of things that happen. And, there's going to be similarities. There's going to be overlap.
Yeah, that's right. Cause it's happened to me before. Like, in my time in songwriting, I can remember writing a song and then the guy in my group at the time, his name was Corey. And he was like, hey, that's that song. And I'm like, no, it's not. I just wrote this. He goes, he played the song and I started doing the Vanilla Ice thing Where it's like, see how that one's like dun 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 dun, and see how mine's like dun 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 dun. It is like I couldn't believe that I really had been influenced by this song, but subconsciously.
Yeah, 100%.
I just wrote the song, and the melody was great, and it turned out to be this other song.
Yep.
And we just scrapped it, and I'm like, but at the moment I was super defensive.
Yeah,
well, because of my heart, I wrote an original.
We had a song that I co-wrote, and I was convinced when we finished it, because it was a really great song, and I'm not going to say what it was because it did actually go on to get cut, but we at the end of writing it, I'm like, I know that this is another song, man. Like, I just know that this melody, like, it sounds too familiar, it sounds too classic. And he's like, no, it just means that it's. And then I was like, I'm telling you, it's a Bryan Adams song. And I literally went through like Bryan Adams' entire catalog trying to figure out what song it was that this was similar to. Never found it. Was convinced, like, all right, we're clear. Like, whatever, everything happened. No joke, like a month ago, I was just listening to the radio and a song came on and I was like, that's the one I thought it sounded like. Now, I think we're still okay. I don't think it was like close enough that there's going to be any sort of like litigation around this. And the song that was cut, certainly it wouldn't be worth litigation to kind of lost revenue. But yeah, it's funny. Like I knew that there was something in my head that sounded somewhat familiar, but sometimes it's just subconscious, man. You have no idea where it's coming from.
Yeah, it's true. And your point about it sounding different on the cut was a point you made in the documentary Bluebird, or the point that was made, which is when you hear a writer in the round sing, you're actually getting sort of the authentic feeling, original, sort of the beta feeling, or maybe even the alpha feeling that caused that song to become what it was.
Yeah.
And when the artist gets it, they have to put their shine on it.
Yep.
And then it's really produced and it's really sort of shiny. And what happens in that process is kind of the difference between listening to an MP3 and a vinyl record.
Right.
You can't really put your finger on it, but you just know that that didn't really happen to them, although they're very freaking talented and convincing that it did. And then when you hear the songwriter sing it, it's like it's the last song they're ever going to sing. It's like, oh my God, like they're reliving this moment that was probably trauma. And I've always said that, I was given the gift of getting piano lessons young so that I could, or young enough so I could play this for the rest of my life. And it became my therapist.
Yeah.
Because I don't need therapy because I have a piano and I can just go sing about it or play and get that all out. So it's really powerful. I do want to talk about the story of how you got the opportunity to do the Bluebird documentary. But before that, I want to stick on ABC a little bit longer because you did karaoke for The Bachelorette. Is that correct?
Karaoke for The Bachelorette.
On ABC?
I don't know. Did we do that? Describe it a little bit more.
Well, apparently
I sang karaoke with The Bachelorette.
With The Bachelorette.
Broadway, but
yeah, can you tell a story of you singing karaoke?
Where did you pull that from?
This crack research team, Brian, for The Bachelorette, and then talk about like the process of co-writing songs for those musicians playing on the show Nashville. So just those two things.
Well, if I'm thinking of the same thing that you're thinking of, that was just a drunk night after a CMA fest. No, it was. Is that what you're talking about? Just singing on Broadway with The Bachelor? So yeah, it was. Oh gosh, it was. So yeah, it was when I was with ABC. We were at the show at Nissan Stadium, and. After the concert was over, everybody was like, what are we doing? We're going to Broadway. And our crew that night was like, I think Jeff might've been with us. I forget who was out for that, but I know it was, what was her last name? Andy. It was the name of the Bachelorette. And like Dorfman, I think Andy Dorfman, something like that. And then my buddy Jason Thompson, who is, at the time he was on General Hospital. He's on a different show now, like Young and the Restless or one of those, but he's an actor and he was out for it as well, doing some stuff, doing some like signings or whatever for ABC. he and I, after that night, that was my first night meeting him, but he and I ended up becoming buddies and ended up co-writing some stuff because he's a musician back in LA together. So it's all coming full circle. But yeah, we ended up on, I forget which karaoke bar on Broadway. I think it was, what's the Blue something? Anyway.
Yeah.
So we ended up
like
Friends in Low Places karaoke with Andy, and it was late night. She was, I think, actively the Bachelorette at the time. So like the PR team, when we exited the bar, kind of stumbling around, we're not very happy that we had kept her out so late in a very public setting, and kind of like quickly tried to usher her back to her hotel. But yeah, that was a fun night. And then
Can she sing?
Sorry, go ahead.
Can she sing?
I will plead the fifth on that. I don't think any of us could in that state at that night. Yeah.
Well, yeah. But this is a good segue into the next thing about the co-writing for the show Nashville.
Sure.
I think a lot of people will be interested how you get the opportunity to do that.
Sure.
But also the point is you can sing and you can play. So how did you get that opportunity and what was that like?
Yeah. So I will credit two of my favorite people on planet Earth, Don Soler and Frankie Pine. Don is the head of music for what was then ABC Studios, now ABC Signature, but kind of all of the ABC television oversees the music for that. And so she's the one that I pitched the idea of the music doc series to at ABC. And it turned out that she and T-Bone Burnett, who was the executive music producer of the first couple seasons, had already been kind of talking about something similar. So she and I quickly became, soulmates in what we were creating, wanting to create. Her being, so passionate about music, me being a musician and so passionate about combining my two loves of music and film, and really bonded over that. Frankie Pine was the music supervisor on Nashville, which is no small task with a show that's that heavy in music and not just licensing music. It's all about, origination of music and kind of organically weaving it into the stories of each episode. And right now I'll give her a little plug. She's a music supervisor on Daisy Jones and the Six. So that's coming out right now. So she's still crushing it. But yeah, the story is that I kept it a secret that I was a songwriter for most of the time that I was working on the series until I did. There was a song called This Town that was written by three writers, Jada Dreyer, Andrew Rollins, and I'm forgetting the third guy's name. I feel bad that I'm forgetting this, but so Andrew Rollins, the writer, we shot an episode of our series called On the Record for that, and got to know him just on set and found out that he lived in Studio City, which is right next to where I was living at the time in Toluca Lake in LA. And just seemed like an approachable guy, really nice guy. And so I finally worked up the nerve. I was like, all right, this is the guy I'm going to ask. And so I sent him a note and said, hey, I know this is going to sound cheesy, but I do a little writing. Would you ever consider co-writing with me? And I had never written with another person before. At that point, it was just like, kind of a side thing that side passion thing. I'd written some songs myself. And, but through the show and seeing the Nashville scene, like, totally started understanding co-writing and the importance of it. And he very graciously agreed to listen to a few of my songs, and I guess saw something there. And we had breakfast the next morning and talked a little bit. And so then when I got back to LA, we got together, and the first song that we wrote together ended up being a cut on the show. So wow. He helped me get it to Frankie. I think he obviously legitimized me in Frankie and Don's eyes, but it was a song called Surrender that Raina James and Deacon Claiborne, Chip Essen and Connie Britton sang at the Bluebird Cafe. So it was a big moment. So that kind of got me in the door as a songwriter for the show. And then, I don't know why I did air quotes, as a songwriter for the show. And then Frankie very generously invited me to, she first invited me to one at her place in Thousand Oaks in LA. She did like a writer's retreat camp thing where she would invite some of the writers, the songwriters that she had worked with for the show, had them all come to her place for a day. And with Callie Corey and some other producers from the show. And they kind of gave us the upcoming storylines and potential song needs. And then they paired us up with other writers and go off and, see what you can write that day. And then we would perform it at the end of the day. It was a really cool experience. And that first day I got paired with a guy named Philip LaRue, who has now become a really close friend of mine. One of our songs from that session almost made it on the show, but ended up not. But then when I moved to Nashville, in partnership with Big Yellow Dog, which is a big publisher in town, they hosted another songwriting camp, and Frankie again invited me, and she paired me with an amazing writer named Keelan Donovan, who's signed to Big Yellow Dog. We wrote 2 songs that day, and both of the songs made it on the show. So that was a pretty surreal.
It's such a unique experience too, because I think most people's experience, both in music and in film, I think their experience and idea of how you get music onto a show is through sync licensing.
Right.
And the way you
did it for most shows,
was so cool and organic and inside. It's like, I think it's the way people would want it to happen.
Yeah. Oh, it was like a romance. Yeah. It's like a love story of like me and this show and the relate. Because the weirdest thing about it was so meta. It was so meta because we ended up doing an episode of our music doc series about the song that I wrote that got on the show. And it was like, that one was super meta because you were like, now I'm behind, now I'm in front of the camera from being behind the camera. But it was really weird because I got to go on set. What was really cool is Tim Lauer, Buddy Miller produced the first song, Surrender, and I was still in LA, so I didn't get to come to the session, which really bums me out because Buddy's a freaking icon, and being in the studio to see him produce a song that I wrote would have been pretty awesome. But Tim Lauer, once I was in Nashville for the last 2, graciously invited me into the studio, and I got to see that process. Having been in the studio and like shot them do it for other songs, that was pretty surreal. And then being on set to see them shooting the scene of the song, and like some of the actors that I had like at that point become friends with, just having been on set so much. They're like, "Hey man, what are you doing here today? I didn't know you guys were shooting." I'm like, "Yeah, we're not shooting today. I actually wrote that song that you just sang." He's like, "What?" So that was, the whole thing is kind of unreal. Yeah.
Unreal. Yeah. Super meta too. It reminds me
super meta. And I thank Frankie Pine and Don Soler every day for those opportunities.
Yeah. It's amazing what happens when you just ask. You just get it. It reminds me of this guy. There's this guy, and I think it's with Elon Musk, but there's this guy, it might be another celebrity, but he's a fan, and he takes a picture with him everywhere he goes. But when he takes the picture, he's always holding a picture of the previous picture.
Oh, it's interesting.
So there's a picture out there on Twitter. If it's Elon, it's somebody else. But there's a picture of this guy where he's taking a picture of him holding a picture of them two, holding a picture of them two, holding a picture of them two, holding a picture of them two.
Wow.
And if you zoom in, you just keep seeing pictures of the guy holding a picture of the previous picture, and it's nuts. And he's going to keep doing this until he dies, apparently.
Wow.
And he's going to end up with this sort of super meta picture that'll probably sell for millions of dollars one day if it's blown up, and it's like a nice quality picture of him holding 100 other pictures of meeting Elon or whoever. If it's not Elon, it's somebody else. But anyway, That made me think of that. So for this international audience who may not be aware, can you just briefly describe the significance of the Bluebird Cafe and tell the story of how you got the opportunity to do this documentary?
Sure. It's kind of hard to understate the significance of a place that you would probably drive by and not even notice. It's, as you know, in a strip mall in Green Hills, which is a suburb of Nashville. It's in a very unassuming place. It's like, next to a barber shop and a dry cleaner and a beauty salon. And the significance is just that it very organically became a kind of proving ground for songwriters and a community center almost for songwriters in Nashville as in a rite of passage. But the thing that really struck me about it that I didn't even really understand, I knew from the show and then from what I learned, the significance of just the things that have come out of there, like the careers that have been birthed there. I think that's the headline, right? Is that this is the place where Garth Brooks was discovered and signed his record deal. This is the place where Faith Hill was discovered. This is the place where Taylor Swift was discovered. This is the place where, you can go on a list of A-list genre defining artists that have come out of this place. But the thing that really kind of struck me that a lot of people don't realize is that it is committed to being a shelter for songwriters and a safe place for them to practice their craft, to find their tribe that we talked about earlier. And even more so, almost more important, is a place for them to always come back to, no matter if they're in the sunset of their career and they're not getting all the cuts that they used to. It's still a place that they can go and play their hits and kind of get that recognition, but also to try out new stuff and just have a place to come and perform. And so to describe it to somebody that doesn't understand what we're talking about, the whole place is probably I think it might on paper be 2,000 square feet, but the actual room that like the performance of the venue room is probably like 1,500 square feet, maybe 1,400 square feet. It's dingy. It's got drop ceiling. It's it's cramped. There's just normal table, like vinyl tablecloths on like round tables, square tables with like rickety old wooden chairs. It's got church pews in a corner. And the thing that's really unique about it, it does have like a little stage, and stage is kind of in air quotes because it's only about 6 inches off the ground.
Yeah, that's true.
And some of the shows are on a stage, which is kind of in a more typical like coffee shop type environment. But what they kind of trademarked as their thing is called In the Round, where in the middle of the room, there'll be 4 or 5 songwriters that just sit in a circle with their guitar or their piano, and the audience sits among them. So they're kind of just like plopped in the middle of the audience. And so if it's a night that Garth Brooks stops by and wants to play In the Round, you may be, 2 inches away from his elbow as he's playing guitar. And, he may spit on you when he's singing. Like it's that.
No, it really is like that. Yeah.
That close. And everything that is performed there primarily is like fully acoustic, just the purest version of the song. So it's just guitar, vocal, piano, vocal. It's kind of, the deconstructing the song that you've heard on the radio, like you said, in its purest form, the songwriter in the moment that they wrote it, kind of in its genesis, is how you get to hear it. So it's like hearkening back to like the MTV Unplugged kind of vibes, but like more so. It's just this like super acoustic.
But I think it predated MTV Unplugged.
Oh, for sure it did. Yeah.
So how did you get the opportunity to do this incredible documentary?
So through the show Nashville, which the Bluebird Cafe is kind of a central character and location in the show, they ended up actually building a replica of it on a sound stage because it's, as I now know all too well, very difficult to shoot in such a small room without being able to move walls and, light from above and all kinds of stuff. But yeah, the president and GM, COO, CEO, and pretty much everything. She runs the Nashville. Her name's Erica Wallem-Nichols. I had gotten to know her through having shot there a few times for the stuff that we were doing for ABC. And we just kind of hit it off, and we had stayed in touch. I had bugged her for tickets a couple times, and my business partner, Jeff, and I happened to be in London for the Country to Country Festival. It's a country music festival that they do every year in London, shooting some stuff for the CMA team, the Country Music Association, and was kind of like flipping through the agenda and like things that were going on around the festival. And I saw that they were doing like a Bluebird Cafe satellite songwriter showcase thing in there. And so I texted Erica in London. So I texted Erica and said, "Hey, are you in London?" She's like, "Yeah, me and Roger, her husband, are here. Are you guys here?" I'm like, "Yeah, we should get dinner." So we went and got dinner at the O2 Arena, which is where it was the following night. And, it's just like a general catch up, like hadn't seen you in a while, good time. And at the end of dinner, right around when dessert showed up, Erica got really serious. We're like, "Uh-oh, what's going on here?" And she's like, "So I want to talk to you guys about something. She's like, it's the 35th anniversary of the Bluebird this year. I've tried several times and several people have tried and reached out and wanted to do a documentary, like the definitive documentary on the cafe. Would you guys be interested in doing that? She's like, just having worked with you, I think you get it. Like you're, I know you're a songwriter, Brian. Like I think you could be good stewards of the story, which was completely humbling and like shocking to me that she would consider us in that way. But immediately went home that night, like wrote up a pitch, started working on a budget, was like, I'm not letting this opportunity slip by. And so we were like off to the races the next day, but it was a dream project. It was pretty unreal that she would trust us with that. And it was a burden, a heavy weight to bear through the whole process of making sure that I lived up to that and did it justice. But hopefully we did.
You really did. And it just goes to show that it's really important to put yourself out there, go to the festivals, whether it be a music festival or a film festival, go there and don't just go there and post yourself on the wall and be better than others or whatever. Like go out, network, shake hands, have that beer. And we've said that from day one, like, every deal that we've been a part of or anytime we've seen someone be successful, it was like they had the gumption to just ask the person that was from Showtime or Starz or HBO, can I just buy you a beer? And of course they want a beer because they've been in a suit all day on a panel and they're there to have a good time. So it's like, let's have a good time with it. And it just goes to show again that there is like sort of this rev gen side of festivals, but there's also this necessity to festivals that lives outside of submission fees and all that, where it's an absolute necessity for the artistic community. So I really appreciate you sharing that. I do want to get into some of the technical just briefly.
Sure.
For the folks listening. So this will just be a few questions on the reality of, you mentioned pitch and budget. It's kind of in that realm. So I wonder for you, what is your go-to for location procurement?
Ooh, good question. Well, most of the time now, we would have a location manager that would kind of run that for us. But
actually, let me ask you a better question around that. How do you know? What do you look for in a location where you say that coffee shop's better than that coffee shop, or this is better than that? What are you looking for? Is there anything in particular?
There's a lot of factors. You first obviously want to kind of judge it by how it's going to look on camera and like what your goals are for the shoot. Is it, a sit down conversation, in which case you want to make sure that it's got the right, acoustics in the room for good audio. You want to make sure that you've got enough natural light, so you're not having to bring a bunch of grip and electric equipment in to light it. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of like first making sure that it has like, are you looking for something rustic and kind of like wooden? Are you looking for something sterile and more modern and kind of bright? So that aesthetically, and from that standpoint, like how it's going to appear for the purposes of what you're trying to shoot. And then there's just a ton of like logistic stuff that then go into it too, of like, what kind of location fee are they looking for? Do they have parking? Can they close down? Are they staying open? If they're staying open, can they turn off the music? Because you can't license any music that's playing and it's terrible for audio continuity and that kind of stuff. So that then you kind of go into like all of the logistics side of it. If it's a big production, typically it's going to be like parking, power, like where are we setting up catering, crafty, like where are we putting the trailers, that kind of stuff. But yeah, so a lot of factors, but it always, starts with, does it have the right look for what the director's going for, the DP's going for?
Very, very good. And in a sit down sort of documentarian situation or documentary set, what is your go-to gear? Can you talk about brand, camera, lens? Yeah.
When there's budget, we always love the Alexa, various forms of that, whether it's the new LFs or the Alexa Mini was kind of like our go-to for quite a while. Red's got some great cameras, but I'll tell you that our kind of secret weapon from a budget best bang for your buck standpoint are the Blackmagic cameras, the Blackmagic
Really? Wow.
Pro, the Blackmagic Pocket 6K, like just, phenomenal cameras that produce an image that most people wouldn't be able to discern the difference between it and like an Alexa. I know there's probably a lot of DPs that would disagree with me, but we shot the Bluebird on the Blackmagic, and we have a home reno show now that we shoot it on. So it's just a great, budget option for like if you're a kid.
That would be like your pick for an indie.
For sure.
If you're an indie filmmaker, go get the Blackmagic.
Don't have a ton of resources or, parents that are going to buy you an $80,000 camera. You can buy a brand new Urso, once you've got like a full package put together, it's probably going to run you, 10,000 plus depending on lensing and stuff like that. But, the base, just the camera body is only about like $5,000.
So even less than a C70 then.
Yeah, I mean the only comparable from like a camera standpoint would probably be like a Sony FS7 or like a C300 or something like that, or Canon. But they, in my opinion, they kind of have a more of like a video leaning look. Again, I'm probably going to ruffle some feathers with this, a purist that love Sony or love Canon, but. I feel like the Blackmagic gives you closer to that kind of like cinema, Alexa Red kind of look than those do.
Got it. No, that's great. That's great. And, you gotta say what's real to you. I think that's fine. Everybody knows kind of the three main players of Avid, Final Cut, and Premiere as sort of your post software. Is there any software that sort of sits as a middleman between what you shot and post that most people don't think about that you like?
Good question. I'm now a Premiere guy. I was a Final Cut guy until they changed. I did the Avid thing for a minute. All great systems. They all have their pros and cons. But I would say, to answer your question, I'm not sure if it's like ancillary, like additional software that kind of sits between. There's, Shot Put Pro is a great thing to get if you're trying, to DIT or, making sure that you get from shooting to editing cleanly without any kind of, damaged files or lost data or anything like that. Which is essentially a software that allows you to copy to 2 hard drives at the same time. So you have redundancy as well as it has like a built-in, it's not just a drag and drop. So it has like built-in mechanisms to make sure that it all transfers properly. Pluralize is a great tool for syncing.
How do you spell that?
Plural, the word plural, and then eyes, like 2 eyes. But it's I believe Maxon now bought Red Giant. It was Red Giant, I believe, but it's a Maxon part of their suite. But it's some of the tools of it are now built into Premiere and some of the other things to be able to kind of sync multiple cameras with audio at the same time. That's really where it shines. Is it's like you can basically dump all of your A cam and your B cam and your audio into it and just hit sync. And it'll automatically it's pretty cool to watch. It'll automatically sync all of it and put it into a timeline for you in whatever software you're in. So, like I said, some of them now do that themselves kind of natively, but that was one that was.
And that's just sort of the nature of technology too, Brian. It's like a lot of times we have an app or someone builds an app and they're like, this is a great app. What a wonderful platform. And they find out their platform is just a feature.
Right.
Right. And it's like, because like Clubhouse is probably the latest, most sort of notable victim of this, where they were sure they had this entire platform that nobody had. And immediately every social media network just showed them it was a feature.
Right.
Like, okay, we'll just let our users go live.
Yeah.
No big whoop. And so now they're scrambling to sort of feature enrich their platform to make it a little bit different and have more creator options and things like that.
Yeah.
But you're right. Eventually, the big boys are going to come in and sort of suck, those platforms up and just turn them into features and as value adds to their monthly fee or whatever.
The other thing I would say, kind of to your question, but a little bit of a deviation from it, is that, I mean, if you want to go completely away from, those types of software, or again, going back to like camera choice and that kind of thing, man, there's apps now that can do things that, would take you hours in After Effects, especially on like the VFX side of like, removing something, or like motion tracking, or some of the stuff that like, visual effects artists, it takes them, it's very expensive and very time consuming for something now that some of these apps can do just, with the auto button. So technology just continues to advance. It's really, it's great. It's a great toolkit. There's so many choices that it can be a little overwhelming, I think. And easy to lose sight of kind of the purity of filmmaking. But I think we now more than ever have, a toolbox that we've never had before. And, going back to me talking about like reel to reel on VHS, to now you can do things in your phone that like, James Cameron was doing, groundbreaking stuff, with a VFX house that probably had a computer the size of a living room, and, a render farm and stuff that took months to render out.
It really is true, Brian. Like really all you need to know is the order of operations and what your sort of app suite will be, and you can get it done from your phone. We're going to share, meaning Bonsai Creative, we're going to share a video in our upcoming newsletter that was, it's a music video. It's completely created by AI. It was created by, including the music and the singing.
Wow. It
was 4 or 5 different AIs used to make it. Now, would you do better? Yes. Is it incredible?
For now.
Yeah. And so we might end up putting that link in the show notes for this episode, just because that might coincide, that might dovetail the release of this along with the newsletter, just so people can just click on that and just geek out. And I can send it to you offline. You'll geek out about it. Just really quickly, you mentioned your pitch. When you and Jeff put a pitch together, what makes for a great pitch in your mind? How do you know it's going to be a winning pitch? What has to be there?
Storytelling. I mean, that's what it boils down to, right? Is it's a pitch in any form of, business or commerce, is like you're trying to have the buyer or your audience understand the narrative of how you seeing success play out, right? So whether that's a business plan, whether that's, a scripted feature film pitch, or whether that's, a commercial pitch for, Burger King. Like everything is about telling a story and helping them see your vision for a successful end product and like how that goes. So whether that's, through visuals, I always think that visual storytelling, I'm a visual learner. So that's always where I try to lean into, is not to have it be too dense, too text heavy. Just try to simplify it as much as you can. I mean, that's kind of like 101 in filmmaking in particular, especially as like a writer, is like, if you can't sell your idea in they call it the elevator pitch or whatever. Like if you can't sell your idea in a couple sentences, then you don't have a good idea, because you need to be able to distill it down to its basic form. Because that's how it needs to be marketed. That's how, the general public needs to understand it. So try to do that, try to get really, really concise with how you're selling the product visually, how you're weaving that narrative, and then obviously trying to figure out and anticipate all of the holes that your audience will poke in that, and getting ahead of that and kind of having answers for all of that.
This idea of asking yourself, how do I lose, not how do I win?
Yeah.
And one of the things that, in one-on-one sessions I've said before is go review your favorite websites as a good practice for pitching, and at least learning how to be concise with language and being a better copywriter.
Yep.
Because websites that are great have no wasted words. They put one sentence in giant bold, and that sentence pretty much tells you what they do. And if you scroll up one more page, that next sentence in bold will tell you who the hero is, who the enemy is, and they're the guide. Basically, right. It's just like a hero's journey. If you look at websites, and right. So there really is a connection between storytelling and your favorite websites as well. Just as a add-on, an amendment to what you said, because I think that was beautiful advice.
Yeah, and I think what you said about anticipate the no is. It's easy to convince yourself in like a positive feedback loop of, I have a great idea. This is great. But yeah. you want to come, because most of your gatekeepers are coming from a no, right? Like they're starting at a no. You're starting at a yes. Yeah. But you need to go and be in their minds and start at a no and convince and figure out how to convince them and get them to a yes. So yeah.
I said that on a panel. I said, as an investor in films, I'm looking for reasons to disqualify the movie,
right,
as a default, right. Because I have to, right? And so that is exactly right. That's a great point. What are the best pieces of advice you've received in your career so far, Brian?
Good question. Something that my parents instilled in me since childhood is be humble. Be kind, always treat people well. I think probably in every industry, but specifically in the film industry, it's a pretty small, it feels big and scary, but in the end, it's a pretty small community. So if you start treating people poorly or acting a certain way, it will come back to bite you. I mean, even like, yep. One of the mantras is like, be nice to the assistants, because they're probably going to be your gatekeeper in a couple of years. So like, there's no, try to check your ego at the door. So that was something that, my parents instilled in me young. But one of the things that I was told early on, and now I tell people and kind of keep trying to convince myself of, is that you'll come into any industry and think that everyone around you knows more than you, and that, everybody's an expert in what they do and in their field, but everyone has imposter syndrome and no one really knows what they're doing. Everyone's kind of figuring it out as they go. And I think it's that, again, freedom of being able to make mistakes and not know and ask questions. I think it is really important. So that was something that was told to me early on. Is that, someone that I respected that had worked in the upper echelons of the entertainment business and said, don't overthink it. We're all making it up. We're all figuring it out as we go.
Yeah. A really, really wonderful piece of advice. In the same vein, you are frankly around a lot of people in film all the time. Some of them are new, even down to PAs. So what are the biggest mistakes you see filmmakers make, and what advice would you give to avoid those mistakes?
It's mistakes that I made early on. The thing that I see, I think, as the number one mistake, other than, I think there's a general sense of immediacy that everyone wants when they start out in the business. And I think that's happening more and more now because of social media and kind of TikTok and Instagram, how people can become famous so quickly. Is that there's a sense of, I hate to use the word entitlement, because I feel like that's what like millennials and Gen Z keep getting, thrown at them all the time. But I have noticed that there is a sense of like, I should already be here without all these steps in between, and not kind of respecting the process, respecting the hierarchy. So I think that's a mistake, is to not realize that, similar to what's the mantra in music? Like you have to put in your 10,000 hours or whatever it is in order to master, or I guess to master anything, right? Like you have to put in your 10,000 hours.
Tipping point idea.
Right. So I think it's that, and like knowing that, it's about the journey, not the destination. Put in your work. Be humble. Know your place. But the number one mistake that I see, specifically in filmmaking, and especially if you want to be a writer or a writer director, is that whatever project you're working on is the project. That is going to be the project, right? And you keep writing and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting and putting all of your energy into one project, because you're convinced that that's going to be your break. That's going to be your project. That's going to be the thing. There are obviously examples of that working. And they're famous, and people write books about it, and you romanticize
Robert Rodriguez.
Right. Robert Rodriguez, Amarachi, that kind of stuff. There's a reason why you can only point to a few of those, and they're like legend in the industry, right? Because that's very rarely the case. And like I said earlier, just be prolific and diversify your portfolio of work, and just put in those 10,000 hours, and don't put them all into the same project over and over and over. I did that with a couple different scripts where I got stuck in that cycle of just rewriting and I would take every note from every person and try to like keep making it, and it lost its identity of what the original idea even was, but even more so, it was wasting my time. Like I could have been working on the next thing and iterate. All of that iterating could have been to make me a better writer, to get to the project down the road that is the project, versus like just continually rewriting the same project. So that's another trap that I see a lot of young filmmakers fall into, is just obsessing over one project instead of just letting it go and moving on to the next thing.
We're over 300 episodes, and I don't think anyone's ever said that. And that's remarkable to me. I could be wrong. We've done a lot of these episodes, but it's great advice. And because I actually see that all the time, that whole eggs in one basket thing. It's crazy. What is Riverside Entertainment's approach to P&A, or branding and marketing?
We're trying to get better at it. It has definitely been an Achilles heel for me, especially. I don't like, even the appearance of like self-congratulation. So marketing's icky and feels weird. But as a company, it's a lot easier because you're like celebrating the collective we. It's not like about me. Social media is a huge component. I think Instagram is a great medium for a production company because you can kind of, showcase your work and it's a very visual medium. So for us, that's a great platform to do that. We do work with a publicist. So like whenever we do have projects to try to talk about or get, traction in trades or, get press around, we'll use a publicist to help get that done. A lot of it for us is word of mouth and reputation. Obviously, we work on the website and all of it, trying to create like a cohesive brand, cohesive narrative of what we do, which is really difficult because we are all over the place. Like we're not, it's a lot easier for some of these companies that like specialize in outdoors content or only do doc content or only do reality TV or only do, high-end glossy commercials or only do network promo. Well, we kind of do all of that. So it's hard for us to kind of roll that into one brand, one identity that's easy to market. But where we've kind of found our sweet spot is, again, going back to what you said on the website, is trying to figure out what is that one sentence that kind of defines us, is that we're just great storytellers that can elevate any project for our client and create great stories with, exceptional production quality and at a reasonable cost. So that's really where we try to found our sweet spot and leaned into the marketing.
When you have a specific project, do you outsource for the branding and marketing, or do you guys try to do it in-house?
Well, a lot of them are, work for hires with clients that have their own teams that pretty much handle most of that. So if it's like a commercial or,
or let's say Bluebird, for example.
Bluebird's a totally different beast. So anything original, that's like wholly original, which Bluebird was, we didn't get a ton of support from our distributors, which we were hoping for a little bit more of. So it actually was pretty much solely on us. We tried to leverage a lot of the talent and relationships and artist relationships that we had in the film.
Right.
The community aspects. And Bluebird is so beloved within the artist and songwriter community, to try to get amplification through them. We worked with a really phenomenal. Her name's Julie Dansker. She kind of came on to consult us and help us figure out how to get better placement on iTunes. She came up with a great strategy to to get it onto the homepage of Apple TV's, main page. They got it to the number
that first row, that top row.
Yeah. Which got it to the #1 documentary on iTunes that week, which was incredible. So it was just a lot of like kind of homegrown ground level efforts. We did have a publicist that helped with a few things here and there. There's a lot of lessons learned. Again, there's a lot of mistakes that were made that we're now, learning from, and all of those learnings are going into our next projects and how to improve that process.
You mentioned 10,000 hours, Brian. That's a reference to the book Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. Are there any other books you can recommend to creatives?
Oh yeah. Let's see. That's a great one. The War of Art was one that I read years ago.
Wow.
It's a good one.
I'm reading that now.
Yeah. I mean, from a like,
I've had it forever and just now reading it.
Yeah. From a filmmaking perspective, if you're a writer, I really love Sid Field. He has a book called Screenplay, which is great. It's more like kind of a theory type book, but the one that I really like, because it had more like practical elements of like putting things into action, was it's called The Screenwriter's Workbook, I think. Sid Field. Yeah. Sid Field.
Yeah.
I'm a sucker for the romance of Robert Rodriguez. So Rebel Without a Crew is kind of, the one that I read in film school that I really loved. As I was starting to get into like the independent side, there's several good books on like independent filmmaking. There's like the producer's survival guide or something like that. It might be like independent producer's survival guide. And then there's another one. If you're wanting to write for TV and not film, there's another great book called the TV Writer's Workbook. I want to say the author's name is Ellen. I forget what show. I think she wrote for like Everybody Loves Raymond. But it's a great, if you want to understand, because a lot of the like kind of entry barriers for television especially are not understanding the format and kind of being intimidated by like, how am I supposed to do this? How many acts are in a television pilot? Like, should I be writing a spec pilot for a show that already exists, or should I be writing an original pilot? And, what are the story beats? How should I end an act? Like, how do I structure this? Because, if you're a good writer, that doesn't necessarily mean you understand how to fold into the kind of machine that already exists. That machine's becoming a lot more fluid now with all the different, mechanisms of delivery with streaming and everything. But the fundamentals are still more or less the same. So that's a good book to kind of to pull the curtain back from the Wizard of Oz and not have it be so intimidating. And, same thing with the Screenwriter's Workbook, is it really kind of boils it down to like the core elements that any great movie have. It seems like impossible to write something as, perfect as Good Will Hunting or, Shawshank Redemption or something. But then when you break it down and really look at like you said, the hero's journey, and like, here's the different act points and here's like the plot points. And it is a kind of a formula, even though, it's, you want to create like your original spin on that.
Yeah. There was an app I used to use called Contour that Ellen Sandler says producer Papa Bear, by the way.
Ellen Sandler. Thank you.
Yeah. And it would allow you to break down your script by beat. And if you couldn't fill out those beats, you knew you didn't follow the guide properly. Like, you knew you were missing certain plot points. Yep. It was basically an algorithm that says most winning screenplays have this many plot points by act 1, 2, 3. Yep. It reminded me of like that songwriting book Jason Blum wrote back in the day, where it's like, these are how many syllables are in a 3-sentence stanza. And, most times if you get this, you're going to hit, the ear the right way. And, and this is how long a good radio intro is, right? Like I'm not saying that everybody should write screenplays or songs that robotically, but I remember using Jason Blum's method to be practiced in it. I would go to Fido, a coffee shop, in this place called Hillsborough Village, and I would grab newspapers. They would have free newspapers just sitting around. So I would just grab them. And me being a journalism major, I know that there's a separate job called headline writer. And so it's a job. And so they're not all created equal, just like any other industry. Some are good headline writers, some are bad. So I would take these ones, I'd read all the headlines, like, oh, that's a killer headline. And I would just write the headline, and then I would write the song.
Oh, I love that.
Headline. And then I would go across the street to Vanderbilt and try to put chords to it. And what was crazy about that is the students would be in there because they thought I was a student there. And they would give me an instant feedback loop. They knew who I was at that point. And they were like, Chris, that one's not good. Or they would literally say, Chris, that one I would buy if it were recorded. It was amazing.
That's awesome.
It was such an amazing process. So I totally dig what you're putting down there.
And it's one of those things where you come out of, like, when you're, an ambitious kid with all of the courage in the world, and you think that you're going to be you're going to change the game, right? Like, you're going to do, I don't want to follow some formula. Like, David Lynch didn't follow a formula. It's like, it's one guy, who's like, a genius and arguably not that commercial. So you look at, like, your favorite films, and when you do break them down that way, and you're like, no, it did. Oh, it followed it to a T. Oh yeah. On page, it's like a magician revealing the secret to the trick. Yeah, exactly.
It can either make you feel stupid, or it can make you so enlightened. Like, I choose the latter. I choose the optimistic side of everything. So it's like, no, I'm not going to sit there and be like pissed off that I fell for something. Yeah. No, there's a trick to it. There's a little formula in the background. And once the trick is revealed, you know how to do it going forward. And the limit is just your creativity. Your friends, Brooke and Bryce, they have a show produced by a friend of this podcast, Sarah Coonan, who we love and has done a wonderful interview on this. So you guys can go back and listen to our interview with the wonderful Sarah Coonan. I know that you work with Brooke and Bryce and Sarah, and Brooke and Bryce posted on Instagram just the other day that they're off for a well-deserved, much-needed vacation.
They're back now, yes.
Yeah, and it was like, in perfect timing, I get it. And it made me think, like, even for people who have what they want per se, there's still like rest. There's still a place where the darkness can seep in. And so I was just wondering if you've ever been in a dark place yourself in this business. A lot of creatives get in that dark place. And if so, how did you get through it?
Yeah. There's been a couple times. I mean, those years in LA where I kind of, before I got the gig at ABC, when you have so many close calls and you start to doubt, your ability and, like, how is this going to go? How old am I going to be before I finally, I need to get my life going, so there's that kind of like starting out. There was a few times where, you start to get down on yourself and really start to kind of doubt the path that you're on. But then I would say, even like as with the success of the company, there's been a couple instances where there's either misunderstandings or just uncomfortable, situations that happen, whether it's internally or externally with collaborators or colleagues or, internal people on your team, where there's doubt or failures and things that are scrutinized that then kind of send you down the rabbit hole again of, like, is this the right path? And is this, so yeah, I think that's natural. And I think it's healthy, because a lot of times that'll kind of purge you of any sort of negativity that shouldn't exist, and help to kind of give you the clarity of who to partner with, how to move forward, how to communicate better with your team. And sometimes it just airs a lot of things that have gone unsaid. And then for me, there's been a couple times where this business, like many, surely music, but this one as well is it's hard to juggle and maintain a good family balance, a family life with your career. Making Modern I had my second child. My wife had our second child. Right as we were beginning.
You helped, bro.
Yeah. What's that?
You helped.
I helped. Yeah. She did most of the work. like right around when we were actually going into production on Making Modern on that show, and that created friction on both sides, honestly, because I felt like if I was paying too much attention to the show, I was letting my wife, who was postpartum and dealing with a newborn and sleep deprivation, all those things, or if I was focusing too much on the family, I was neglecting the show. So that's always hard. And same thing happened with Bluebird, actually, right as we had our first child, is right when we were kind of in the thick of it with Bluebird, and I was so obsessed with, because it was kind of my opus, right? Like I became so obsessed with it. I was honestly, I took on too many roles with that project, producing, directing, editing, like all of it. So that kind of consumed me and it forced me to miss out on a couple things as a father and husband. So I think those are probably the dark times that I can recall offhand. But those, again, it's finding that balance and finding that rhythm and figuring out your priorities and learning how to say no to things and learning how to manage your time better and grow as a person.
No, I love that, man. And speaking of time, you've really been incredible with yours, and I just can't thank you enough. I only have a few questions left, maybe one, and we'll get you out of here. Can you tell this audience the key differences between directing a person and directing the AFLAC duck?
Oh man, was that one? That was one for the ages. Well, the duck, the duck requires a secondary duck. So here's the secret behind the AFLAC duck.
Okay.
When you see it shake its tail feather, or you see it say AFLAC, that's typically because it's a male duck, most likely, is the duck on camera. And there's likely a handler holding a female duck in front of the male duck to get him excited. And that's why he shakes his tail feather and starts quacking, because he's horny and he wants to get
amazing.
The female duck. So that was the true comedy and kind of genius behind any of that happened. So for everyone listening, if you go onto Riverside-ENT.com, you'll, I think, be able to find under our branded section the AFLAC series that we did. It was a CMA partnership where the AFLAC duck goes on his journey through to become a musician in Nashville, from busking on Broadway through the Bluebird to playing his Opry debut at the Grand Ole Opry, and eventually ending up on the red carpet at the CMAs with Trace Adkins.
I love it.
And it was a real duck. And we've got some great BTS photos as well of our Steadicam movie operator, Sam Willie, with like a duck quacker in his mouth, trying to get the duck to look at him and quack. And he was just, that was a fun one.
It's just funny because, you assume there's a lot of things going on, and it just turns out, just get the duck horny. He'll perform.
Get the duck horny. I mean, it's the same for people, right? It's
right. Get him horny, and everything will work out just fine. Brian, this has been incredible, man. I can't tell you how much it means to us to have you on. A lot of wisdom in this one, a lot of didactic, a lot of education, a lot of inspiration. So that makes for a perfect episode in my book. Can you tell everybody where they can find you on social media, on the internet, maybe see some of your work, and make sure to plug where people can see Brooke and Bryce's show as well?
I'm going to try to do this without laughing after
the producer Papa Bear dropped.
It was just dropped. For some reason, I'm really thirsty for some wine right now. Oh, man. All right. So let's start with Riverside Entertainment. You can find us on Instagram at riverside.ent. I believe that's the same handle, but I'm not sure. We're not that active on Twitter. You can find us on LinkedIn. Mine is at Brian Losch. That's Losch, Brian with an I. And riverside-ent.com is our website. If you want to need to reach out, contact at riverside-ent.com. And Making Modern with Brooke and Bryce airs on You can find it on the Magnolia Network, on Discovery Plus, or on HBO Max. We are having season 3 will be announced, and so season 3 should kick off this summer. But you can find the first 2 seasons there on those platforms. And it's a great home renovation show with a little bit of a twist. Brooke, the wife of the couple, is the builder, and Bryce, the husband, is a designer. They're here in Nashville. They've got a modern twist on a lot of what you're used to seeing on home reno shows, so it's a lot of fun, and a lot of fun DIY takeaways that you can do as well. Brooke's a wizard at doing the customizations and fun DIY projects.
Yeah, she really is. She's remarkable, as are you. And we'll end on this. Give us the pitch for why we should all double down on pickleball.
Man, it is the fastest growing sport in America, 2 years going. Where did you get all this information? I'm completely obsessed. It's like if you're a little too slow to be good at tennis, and you want a little bit more exercise than playing ping pong, pickleball's your sport.
Pickleball is, but you're standing on the table.
That's right. Yeah, it's like standing on a giant ping pong table. Yeah. You
said it's the second fastest growing sport in America?
It's the fastest, my friend, for 2 years.
Fastest.
Yeah. Fastest growing sport in America.
Holy moly. All right, man.
Yeah.
I have a friend named Velvet Hammer that tried to get me into pickleball, and I said pickleball, but I shouldn't have shunned it, right?
No, you got to try it, man. I'll take you out. We'll play some pickleball. We'll grab a beer after.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
One more plug.
Yeah, please.
Riverside's gotten into scripted. That's kind of a big shift that we're making. And we were just in Berlin for the Berlin Film Festival world premiere of Manodrome, which will be Riverside's first foray into scripted features, starring Jesse Eisenberg and Adrian Brody. Hopefully coming to you in 2023, maybe early 2024. But yeah, shout out to that film. So if you see it pop up, go see it.
Hell yeah. That's awesome. I cannot wait. And I think there's a lot of places where our circles create a Venn diagram. So I know we're going to stay in touch offline, outside of pickleball and beer as well. And anybody that's listening, you know where to go to learn more about the Make It podcast. Of course, you can always go to bonsai.film, www.bonsai.film. You can find us on social media at _Bonsai Creative. And again, why not Bonsai Creative? Because there's a sweet British gentleman that owns it, and we're waiting for him to pass away. No, I'm kidding. He's a sweet guy. I've talked to him, but he's not selling it to us. And the website or the handle. And if you want to listen to this podcast and not just this episode, this conversation, but any conversation, you can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts, and of course on YouTube. So with that, Brian, talk to you soon.
Chris, it's been a pleasure, man. Really appreciate it.
All mine, man. Be good.